We're going to get started. So thank you for joining us today. We're excited to talk about Foreigner with author Hussein Ahdieh. If you have questions, please post them in the chat and we'll get to them at the end of the program. So I'm going to start by introducing our author. He was born and raised in Aries, Iran. He is a sixth-generation Baha'i. His ancestors figuring among the first in Aries to accept Babi and later the Baha'i faith. Hussein immigrated to the United States as a young man of 19. Like many immigrants seeking a better life in America, he worked and attended college in the New York area. He eventually completed a master's degree in European intellectual history and a doctorate in education from the University of Massachusetts. He has had a distinguished career in education in New York. His proudest achievement is to have been one of the founders and assistant headmaster of the Harlan Preparatory School, a world-renowned charter high school for disadvantaged students. And he also served as the director of educational programs at Fordham University. So welcome. We're so glad to have you. And I'm going to turn it over to you for some reading and a presentation, and then I'll come back for questions.
I'm so glad to be here. I'm thankful to Jennifer and other friends who have organized this session. It's really an honor to make this presentation. I have come from a very backward country in contemporary time. It's Iran, or otherwise known as Persia. And I tell you also a short introduction why I decided to write this book. And what happened a few years ago, I was attending a conference in Europe, in Italy actually, and I met some folks from a European publishing house. And in the course of conversation, when I told them my story of where I came from and where I am now, and my religious background and my political view, and they got very interested, and we had plenty communication, and eventually decided to write the book Foreigner. It's really a story of a young man who born in a small village in the southern part of Persia, Iran, and because of religious persecution, was forced to leave that village at the age of 6 with his father on the top of a truck and escaping actually from the village and going to bigger cities of Abadan and other places and eventually coming to America. Let me say some words about Persia or Iran. If you notice, I interchange between Persia and Iran. My preference is to use for the country is Persia, because when you hear Persia, you think of some glorious past, you think of some great poet like Hafez and like Rumi, and you think of a Persian carpet, you think of Persian cat, but when you say Iran, you think of this contemporary, unfortunate political and religious situation and oppression which is going on. And I try to escape from that area as much as I can. Iran, or Persia is one of the oldest civilization in the world. Those of you who are familiar with the history of the world in the 2, 3, 4, 5,000 years ago, you remember the story of Persepolis, you remember the story of Cyrus the Great, the one who is considered the author of the first human rights statement. Actually, there's a cylinder of his writing that they have found is in the British Museum. Then he talks about the right of man to be free and to travel, have a right to pick his own religion and things like this. And it's very unusual for people to think like this for 4,000 years ago. The country is also well known for having plenty oil, and we also know that it was Alexander the Great, the Macedonian emperor, who invaded the country and basically destroyed and burned Persepolis. I'm going to show you a picture of Persepolis later. In the modern time, most likely you heard about 1979 revolution that took place in that country, and a religious leader by the name Khomeini came to power, and they deposed the Shah of Iran, very powerful figure in the Middle East at that time. And since then, the country been ruled by the religious fanatic in that country. And as a matter of fact, there was an election just took place a few days ago in Iran, and they picked up a new president. And the new president is one of the chosen people that may replace Khamenei in the long run. Iran historically, religiously, they were mostly Zoroastrian. I hope you're familiar with some of these things I'm talking about. I don't want to go in detail. Zoroastrian was a faith that was popular 1,000 years ago, and their basic tenet of their faith was Goftar Nik, the good word, Pendar Nik, the good thought, and so they were kind of pure mentality that they were practiced. But then the Arabs and Islam came to Persia about 1,300 years ago, and they destroyed the Persian Empire, they destroyed Roman Empire, that entire part of the Middle East and North Africa and part of Europe and South Asia, they all became a Muslim entity. Now, I was born in a small village in the southern part of Persia. Again, I have a map that I show you later where my village is. The village was only a few thousand inhabitants. When I see some movies about the time of Jesus in Jerusalem or in Bethlehem, or when I see movies about the life of Moses escaping from Egypt, it's very much remind me of my village. It seems that nothing has changed in 1,000 years of the history in that country. We had no roads, no electricity, no running water, no cars. The means of communication and moving around was basically riding donkeys and horses. And of course, their education was impossible. And there was only 1 or 2% of the elite of the village, mostly religious leaders, mullahs. They were the ones who were educated. And their education was mostly knowledge of Quran and some history of Islam and things like this. So in that village, in middle of 19th century, a new movement started, a new religious started, which we refer to it as Babi faith. And Babi and Baha'i faith, this I suggest that you can Google later and get more information, spread all over the country, and almost half the people in my village became Babi and later Baha'i. And this also set up a whole years of persecution. Many of them were put to death, and quite a number of them, they were my ancestors. This prejudice and this oppression had continued since the middle of 19th century, and even it brought to my lifetime. At age of 6, we decided, because they kidnapped my father, they really almost killed him. They attacked our house, they torched his little farm store he had. So we were forced to escape and leave the Aries and move to a bigger city called Abadan. Abadan was a sort of a more civilized and cosmopolitan place to live. The biggest oil refinery in the world was built by British oil company in that place, right on the Persian Gulf. Because, as I mentioned, Persia has a huge amount of oil, and the refinery was refining the oil, and a tanker would land by the shore, and they would take the oil all over the world. So our life in that city was a little more calm because there was the influence of Western culture. There were many Americans, many British and European, and the working class and intellectual were there. But again, of course, being a Baha'i were not quite accepted even in that city. And then I recall a story, actually, I want to share with you about my uncle in that town. I'm saying this thing because these are mostly from the book that I'm sharing with you. I had an uncle, actually, who was kind of accomplished person, and he of a neighboring town. But unfortunately, he was addicted to opium. And then my recollection of my childhood, I was maybe 8, 9 years old, that often at nighttime, he would go to what was a red district of the city of Abadan, and they had this opium den to take care of his addiction. And often he would take me with him because I was so active and so energetic that my mother and others were tired of me, and they were glad to get rid of me so my uncle can take me. So we would go to this area, and I remember these poor men were laying down the ground on these big, heavy pillows, and they had this long pipe with a piece of opium on the top of it, and they were smoking. And I was sitting right on the doorway so I could have some light and I could do my homework. But naturally, little by little, the effect of secondhand smoking would get to me, and I get high and I would fall asleep. And suddenly I would wake up 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, realize that my uncle is gone, everybody else is gone, and I have to find my way home that late at night. And nobody really missed me because they thought I'm with him or with other relatives. Things were kind of not quite comfortable. So as a teenager, I decided to learn a profession and perhaps go for traveling to one of the Persian Gulf countries. So for a whole summer, I got some training to be a barber. I would learn how to cut hair, how to shave, and things like this, to either go to Kuwait or Dubai or someplace. Can you imagine if I would pursue that life? No, I would have my own hair salon in Kuwait, and most likely I'd be a multi-billionaire. But things did not work that way. Around age 17, I decided to come to America. My picture of America was all made up from the movies. It started with Tarzan, if you remember his character. And then later on, when I became a little older, I fell in love with Marilyn Monroe, and I fell in love with Leslie Caron and Gregory Peck and Gene Kelly. These were the people who were my dreams. And I thought if I go to America, most likely I could become like them and enjoy the life. I went to American Embassy in Tehran. Tehran is the capital of Persia. And at that late 50s, early 60s, this Einstein theory of relativity, von Braun, and the rocket and missile that he was behind, everybody was talking about this amazing cutting edge in the science and nuclear engineering. So I told these people in embassy that I want to go to America in broken English. Maybe I knew 200-300 words of English. I want to go to America to become nuclear engineer. I'm sure they laugh at me, but they were helpful. They showed me a directory. They said Columbia and Harvard has this program. I applied. Columbia rejected me right away, but Harvard accepted me. Oh, you should see my parents and my family. They were so proud of me. The word got out that this young boy from village of Aries is going to America, is going to Harvard, and he's going to study nuclear engineering. How little I knew, I can tell you this later, but I tell you now, by mistake, I applied to Howard University. Howard University, probably you know, is a Black university in Washington, D.C. They have no nuclear engineering program. And I'm surprised that they accepted me, but probably they wanted to have a for the first time a foreign student among them. Left Iran, went to Rome, Italy, and oh, I love Italy. Every woman in that town looked like Sophia Loren. They were so beautiful and so colorful, and the language, even though I didn't understand them, but I could see that there is this romantic look of life. I even learned how to eat spaghetti. You don't know how difficult it was to learn how to eat spaghetti, because every time I would pick it up, try and put it in my mouth, I would lose them until somebody teach me what to do and how to eat spaghetti. From Italy, I went to London. That was quite an experience too. Landed in the airport, and in those days in London, they had these fancy old-fashioned taxis, because they looked like a big black box. So I took a taxi, and this good-looking driver with the hats on, with his heavy British accent, asked me some question, and my poor English again, I told him, good hotel, good hotel. So he took me to one of the fanciest hotels in London. How little I knew. We got by the hotel. As soon as the taxi stopped, these two men, again very handsome, tall, over 6 foot tall, dressed very chic. They run toward the car, they open the door, and in my country, when somebody is so good looking and so tall, they usually become minister or a senator or congressman. But these people, I guess they work in the hotel. One of them grabbed my luggage, one of them opened the door for me. So I was so afraid they may steal my luggage. So I ran after them, went inside, registered, and the girls behind the counter wanted to keep my passport. This was, I guess, the security purpose. I refused to give it to her because I was told I should never give my passport to anybody. Because, you know, but anyway, she convinced me, if you don't give us passport, you have to get out. I got in the glass elevator, went to 12th floor, never been in elevator in my life, never been on a 12th floor in my life. It was the most magnificent view of London on the 12th floor. And I had such a good time for 3-4 days that I stayed in London. Got on this ocean liner called Queen Mary a few days later. In Southampton, I got on the Queen Mary ocean liner, and took me 6 days to get to New York City. That ocean liner now is a hotel in Long Beach in California. It's a very nice hotel, actually. I had breakfast there one time just to remember my days on the ship. It's so funny, in the cabinet that I had a roommate type person. I think his name was, what was his name? Oh, Robert Lynch. I don't know if you remember him. Robert Lynch later on became a big TV personality. He is the one who had all these shows called Life of Rich and Famous in 1990s. That was a very popular show on television. So he was very good looking, and he was a playboy. And so he would often take me with him to try to fix a date for me with the other person. Of course, again, being a farmer boy from Aries, I had no idea what to tell the girls, how to handle the date and things like this. I was even afraid if I touch them, they may get pregnant. So this was how ignorant I was. So 6 days on the boat lasted, arrived in New York, in downtown Manhattan. I got the room in the YMCA for $2 a night. And then I found out that was a big mistake. I was not accepted to Harvard, but I was in Harvard. So, but meanwhile, I had to go to a English college, St. Michael's College, Jesuit school in Vermont, to learn some English because I was not really prepared for college yet. The life in that college was really my first encounter with American culture. The whole relation between boys and girls, the classroom, and the most interesting part of those days, the time that I was in cafeteria. I'll tell you a few incidents, what happened. In my country, milk is something very scarce and valuable. I remember the only time my mother would get some milk for me when I was sick. They get some milk, they warm it up, and they give it to a sick patient. Or maybe rich people, they could always have it. But then for me, it was quite surprising that in this cafeteria, there was a machine that you go over there, you put your glass there and pull the handle down, and you get as much milk as you want. My God, it was heavenly. But I often wonder, where are these cows that provide all this milk? Number of times I went behind the building cafeteria to look for the cows that was providing all this milk. How little I knew. Or a chicken, for example. Again, chicken is such a valuable food in Persia. But here, you go over there by the counter, you tell the guy, chicken, and he put you half a chicken right on your plate. Boy, I ate so much chicken in that college. I had lunch. For lunch, I had chicken. For dinner, I had chicken. So I got fed up with the chicken by the time I finished that. Came to New York. Reality of life hit me. I was broke. I had no money. And I had to pay for college. I have to find a place to stay. And you have to, I also should mention that I had a student visa. And as a student, I have to go to school full time. Otherwise, they would deport me. So for a number of years, I was always at the verge of deportation because I had to work illegally, and collect the cash under the counter. And I had the variety. I found a room for $7 a week. I would pay $1 a night, and this was an apartment building on 76th Street and Broadway on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. And the building was quite an interesting community. Lots of addicts, lots of gays, prostitutes, foreigners. Some of these old folks those days is amazing. In the lobby of that hotel, what I remember, there were many senior citizens, 60, 70, 80 years old. They were all sitting there and they were staring at the entrance door to see anybody would come in to say hello to them, any family or friend. Those were sad days for them and for me and for others. I began to look for a job, but I have to remember, I have to find a job that is, they can pay me cash. So one of my first job I got in New York was this brush factory. That was assembly line. Brush would come from one direction, handle come from other side. I would pick them up, put them together, get it punch and drop it, get it punch. And have you seen those movies by Charlie Chaplin when he works in the assembly line? Exactly was my life. And especially since I'm so small, I often think of me imitating Charlie Chaplin. So of course, I was so exhausted. After a week or so, they fired me because I could not catch up with all this handling of the brushes. Then I got a job in the hotel as a bellboy. Then I was with them for a few weeks also, but those heavy luggages that I have to carry. Those days, there was no wheel on the luggages. You have to really pick them up. And the luggages were much bigger those days. I don't know why. So that I fired that. I worked in a chemical company. Finally, I saw an ad in some local newspaper, and it said, the undertaker, $5 an hour, no experience necessary. Oh, I thought this is a dream job. $5 an hour, no experience necessary. So I called him up. Those days I called myself Jimmy. I told him, this is Jimmy. And he said, Jimmy, that's wonderful. Come Monday morning, you have a job. I went home. Of course, I moved to New Jersey and I had to start the school. I told my landlady that from now on, you're going to have the rent always on time. And she was so excited, said, how come, what happened? I said, I'm getting a new job as an undertaker for $5 an hour. Boy, you should see her face. She was an old German woman. He said, what, undertaker? Get out of here. I don't want no undertaker live in my house. I guess some people have some phobia or some problem with undertaker. And I didn't know myself what is undertaker. Later on, I found out I was supposed to wash some dead body. Can you imagine if my family find out that I have come to America to study nuclear engineering, to become another Einstein, and I'm beginning to wash the dead bodies. Well, anyway, that did not work out. But then my dream job came true. My dream job was I became a dishwasher. So for a number of years in the restaurants of New York, I was either a busboy, dishwasher, later on waiter, because I had to go to school daytime and in a restaurant work at night. I'm not saying all these things, but it's part of the book, so I may as well share it with you. I have many memory of those days, and some are happy, some are not. But the greatest thing that happened is that I really enjoy sharing my feeling and my thought with people, with the friends, without fear of being attacked and put down and oppressed. Because again, in my country, for political reason, if you open your mouth and you are not saying the right things, you could easily end up in prison for those reasons. For religious reason, if they realize that I'm a Baha'i, again, I was oppressed. So the glad tiding and the thing that I really enjoy come to America, and most of you folks take this for granted, was this idea that I can talk and I can live without fear of being put down and go to jail or being oppressed. God bless America. Life goes on, and suddenly an angel came about, my present wife, another Persian woman. She was a wonderful girl. She was a doctor. She was good looking. She was from a good family. And the best part, she had green card. Can you imagine what a combination? This green card saved my life. All these years that I had in the verge of being deported because I didn't have a right visa and things like this. So I don't know why she married me, but right away, within 2 months, I married her. And I borrowed $200 for our wedding. I bought her a phony diamond ring that she wore it for a while. Our wedding cost $40. It was a turkey, was some salad and some cookies, and a bunch of friends came and showed up. We all had a good time. So my life started. I have 2 wonderful children out of this marriage. I was very involved in my religious community, Baha'i faith, and I'm grateful really for America to give me the opportunity to intellectually and mentally and otherwise to grow and to raise a family. Right now, my son is a dean of law school. My daughter is a graduate of Johns Hopkins University, a great mother and great writer. So these are all opportunities that I got in America. And I didn't want to write a book and say, okay, in my country, I was poor. I came to America. Now I have 5 Dunkin' Donuts and I'm become millionaire. So that's not important. Basically, my happiness is that this country offered me the opportunity to grow and to be free. I have a collection of pictures and some reading to do that my good assistant, Tatiana Jordan, would show you. And I would, as I go along, I would describe a little more about those pictures. We have selected a couple of statements from the book just as a sample of my writing to share with you. And this is one of them. And it's on the screen, so we can also look at it. I remember only darkness when the sun went down, except for a small kerosene-like hazy orange glow into which the occasional distinct figure would appear and disappear. I remember a torrent of refuse and mud running over the unpaved street when it rained. I remember women covered in dark chador moving like shadows. I remember mullahs in the mosque exhorting the faithful to weep for the martyr. I remember Aries as a sad society of timeless routine permeated by ignorance. Our small agricultural town in 1942, this is when I was born, probably had not changed much in its 1,000 years of existence. At dawn, farmers and shepherds headed out to their orchards in the hills, following in the footsteps of their grandfathers and their grandfather. People went to and fro on an unpaved road outside the wooden door of our house, and on and on. So this is one of the statements. But what I really like to do is show you some picture and give you more explanation, and then give you opportunity to ask some question if you have any. Go ahead, Tati. This is the front cover of the book Foreigner, which is available to Amazon, and it was written by myself and my distinguished assistant, Harry Chapman. This is the map of Iran or Persia, and then my town is in the south part of, I can show it, is right in the south. We're not far from Shiraz. The capital of the country is in farther north, Tehran. So this is not is the Aries is there. And then we move to Abadan, which is on the Persian Gulf. You see in the blue area. Next. This is the leftover from Persepolis. It still exists. It's a historical thing. This Persepolis was a major cosmopolitan city in the old world. And Alexander the Great, they said when he was drunk, he ordered the place to be burned. And this is the leftover, which is still is quite magnificent. This is me and my donkey in my village. A friend of mine, Anne, I describe how my life was and how I look. This is my favorite donkey, actually. And my main responsibility in town with this donkey was to go maybe a mile or so outside the town of Aries. There was a spring. To collect the water, we had two big containers, and I would put them on a donkey for the household. This is a sort of alleyway. It's a little more modern, I think, because I see they have some electric line there. But those days, there was no such thing. But this is the mosque in Aries. It's a very famous mosque. This mosque originally was a temple for Zoroastrian people, fire temple, more than 1,500 years ago. And then later on, when Muslim came and the Arab came, they converted this temple to a mosque. And it's a very famous mosque. This is part of that. Yes. This is again the mosque, and the believers are attending the sessions. Life goes on. This is like, no, this is there's a scene that is quite scary for people like me, Baha'is, because there is a month in Islam called Muharram, which is a special month for the Shia Muslims. And they go through whole ritual and remember the martyrdom of Imam Hussein, the third Imam of their faith. And so the grandson of Prophet Muhammad, and they get through this frenzy state of mind, and they attack the Baha'is, and they often, if you are in their way, you could easily lose your life. This is me when we moved to Abadan, and that's my aunt. As I said, the Abadan was a much more calmer, and we had a better life there. And I think I look cute in this picture. One of my ancestors was a great calligrapher. Ahmad was his name, one of the greatest calligrapher in Islamic world. You know, in Islam, you're not allowed to play music, and you're not allowed to do painting, and it's a vanity to show the faces of people. So what they concentrate mostly was writing and calligraphy and poetry. And so some of the greatest calligrapher of the world came from that part of the world, and my ancestor is one of them. And his work is in all our different museums in different countries. My sweet grandfather. It's my grandmother, Sahib Jan, and that's my father. You remember, if you notice, my grandfather was dressing in more traditional, with the turban on his head and with a clock on his shoulder, abba. But then during my father's time, it changed. They start to dress mostly European and have a suit and tie and things like this. This is a typical Baha'i gathering. Well, I think this was a summer school, which I attended when I was a young boy. And I had lots of good memory from those days. I thought this is a unique picture. This is my aunt when he came to visit us in our village one time from the big city of Tehran. This is her husband, he was so stiff and so serious. But then he had to carry the wife on a donkey, and they were traveling around our little village. Next.
Go read more or no?
No, go show the whole thing. Yeah, keep. There is another statement I'm going to read, and then we continue. Just a couple lines of it. I don't want to read the whole thing. Everything that I knew about America, I had learned from movies. America had a street where Jim Kelly danced and sang in the rain, and a street like Broadway lined with the brightly lit movie houses and theater. American women were Marilyn Monroe being teased on the train by Tony Curtis. American men were Gregory Peck wooing Audrey Hepburn. America was beautiful people in colorful, expensive clothing, smiling happily in large chrome-trim cars going down a coastal highway in the sun, endlessly involved, casting their worries to wind. And then I tell about myself again. Go ahead, so picture. Oh, this is the ocean liner Queen Mary, the one that I mentioned that I came to America. It was a quite experience. This ocean liner was very useful during the Second World War, carried lots of American soldiers to European scene, and then later on became a passenger. This is the typical look of the immigrant and others that would come out of the ship and appears in New York City. This is the look of New York City in 1960s. Was still really magnificent, you know. Nowadays, there are lots of beautiful places, Dallas, Houston, Shanghai, Paris, London. But in early 20th century, even 1960s, New York was the queen of the place. It was most beautiful at nighttime. Everything was lit and absolutely gorgeous. That's my hero, Gene Kelly. Oh, I love Marilyn Monroe. This a friend of mine did this a little bit of painting. This is me against the background of New York City. And this is me lost on the Brooklyn Bridge. This is the life on the factory line, and that's Charlie Chaplin. This is exactly how that brush factory looked like. What is this?
Post office.
Oh, in the post office, I also worked for a short time in this mail delivery system. It was a private company. Who was those bags will get so heavy sometimes, and I have to carry them. Oh, I lost my opportunity to be a good undertaker. This is a typical scene in a funeral house. Oh, this is a fancy dishwashing. Oh, that could be easily me. I have a story about my dishwasher. One night, the way I would get the job as a dishwasher, I could only mostly work on the weekend because during the week I had to go to school, study and all that. So there was an agency on the west side of New York called Roma. We would go over there. It was a long haul, and we would give the man, the guy in charge, $1, and we would sit there, and then the restaurant would call up for additional help. Somebody didn't show up, they need extra dishwasher, extra busboy or waiter. And he would give us a piece of paper with the address, and we go to work. So I gave him $1. He sent me to this fancy Italian restaurant in Brooklyn, I remember. I went there, then I realized, my God, there is an Italian wedding happening that night. And the dishwasher, an old man, could not handle 200-300 guest dishes and all that. And as you know, this Italian love to eat. Between the salad and the pesto and the soup and the main dish and then dessert and this spumoni and this. So these dishes will keep coming, and I was washing, helping. And the old man was there too, but I had to do all the work. At some point, after 3-4 hours, I was really ready to faint. So I took a short break. I went outside the kitchen door. Those of you who know the restaurant situation, there is this revolving door that goes in and out of the kitchen to the dining room. So I went to the dining room, and I was standing on the corner and watching all these beautiful girls and men. They were doing rock and roll and lovely Italian music and dance and light and all that. Somebody went to manager and complained, who is this ugly guy standing in a corner with, with the white dirty apron and all that. So the manager came. I never forget that day. I hope he burned in hell. He picked me up, he picked my shoulder, and he shoved me through this revolving door, pushed me to the kitchen, and I lost control. I fell down. I hit my head against this huge refrigerator and started bleeding so much that they had to call the ambulance. They took me to hospital. They put some stitches by my head. So a few days later, stupid me, I decided to go there and collect my money for the few hours I worked there. Boy, he chased me out of restaurant. He said, do you know how much trouble you cost me? How much it cost me to pay for the ambulance? What happened that night? Get out of here. So that was one of the highlights of my life in the restaurant. What happened actually in this restaurant, I may as well move to something interesting. Lots of people who I was working with were black, young black men mostly, and some Puerto Rican and Spanish or Mexican. And I wanted so much to practice my English. So I would get in conversation with them, and they would tell me their stories of their ancestors, slaves, and what happened, what in Mississippi or in Alabama and New York. And I began to realize their ancestors, the treatment they got from Ku Klux Klan and white supremacists and all that was very much like my life in my village, and the Baha'is and Babis, how much they were persecuted. At nighttime, he was telling us they would come, their faces were covered, they burned crosses, they dragged them out, they hanged them by the tree, and they burned them. My goodness, some of my family was exactly burned to death on the tree because of their faith and religion. So I developed a certain affinity toward the Black people. In 1963, a group of us, few Persian, and I think it was one American, we decided to go to Washington to attend the Martin Luther King March in Washington. It was a magnificent day. Thousands and thousands of people were there. And we stayed there for a few days. We attended some workshop. Of course, since we had no money for the hotel or motel, we sleep in the car. But it left its memory. So a few years later, I get the chance to meet some educators, Ed and Carpenter, and they said that they are thinking of opening a school for a disadvantaged young Black man and woman and prepare them for college. And they mentioned that there is a National Urban League is involved, Manhattanville College involved. These are the nuns, Catholic nuns. There are some rich Jews in New York who are involved. And if I'd like to also be involved in the discussion and preparation for this school, I got so excited. It was my dream to do something like this. So we began to get involved in formation of this school, and the school became so successful that every other week, believe me, we had the hundreds of visitors come from all over to find out what is happening. New York Times had the front page statement, miracle on 136th Street, that they were wondering how this school is managing to prepare these kids who everybody has given up on them. And sometimes they've given up on themselves, prepare them for college. The purpose was that you come to a school, you stay with us for 1 year, we give you all kind of help that we can. We are not going to give you a high school diploma. You go to college, and then we give you a diploma. And I think we have some connection to those Catholic nuns at the first couple of years that they admit them. And then later on, of course, build on those kids who were successful, they took on. We started with 39 students. Eventually, we have 700. And the money was coming mostly from foundation, Ford, Rockefeller, Chase, Coca-Cola Company, and all that. But this foundation have a tendency of not being involved indefinitely with any project. They give millions of dollars to school, and they want to get out. So we had the choice of either closing the school altogether, or because lots of faculty members, they wanted to have a job to join the Board of Education of New York City. which we did. Of course, I didn't want to work for Board of Ed. I moved to Fordham University. By then, I had my PhD, so I could easily get any job anywhere. But then the school is there now, is part of a Board of Education system. I'm getting tired. So I'm sorry to be casual, but I'm willing to show some more pictures. Go ahead. This is the place that I stay, I told you, for $7 a week, the hotel rooms. Oh, the school I was going to, after I found out Howard and Harvard and all mixed up, ended up in a school called Fairleigh Dickinson in New Jersey. And I took a course on, I think, international issues or relation. I always liked these liberal arts courses. And my teachers was a man by the name James Roosevelt, who was the son of the President Roosevelt. Wonderful teacher. And in some occasion, he invited his mother, Eleanor Roosevelt, to come and meet his student. And then what she did, she came to school, and she was very much internationally minded. And she asked, is there any foreign student in the class? And I was the only one, I think. So I got up, and this is a picture of me and Mrs. Roosevelt. This was taken only a few months before she died. She was an extremely amazing woman. God bless her soul. This is a picture of my good wife. She was very good looking. And I use this in Facebook. Her name is Tahireh. This is some scene from Harlem Prep. You know, Harlem Prep, I want to know, there was no such a thing as a classroom. The place used to be a supermarket. The whole New York block, big block, 2 floors. There was a supermarket. The 2 of their managers get shot at nighttime. So they have to give up the idea of running business. So they basically gave it to us. And then with the money from Union Carbide and some other companies, we beautifully furnished it. And Herman Miller gave us lots of good furniture. And this is some students who are getting together for different classrooms. That's one of my favorite teachers, Robert Wilkin, science teacher. Oh, the one on the right is, what's his name?
Bayard.
Who's that? Rustin, yeah. Rustin, he's the one who organized the march in 1963, the March on Washington, Martin Luther King March. He was the main organizer, and he came to a school one day. This is Robert Hayden, a famous black poet who was a regular visitor. Oh, by the way, I should tell you, lots of musicians and talented people, they were helping us to raise funds. And Dizzy Gillespie, Lionel Hampton, Pete Seeger, I'm going to show some picture. And so I had the opportunity to meet with some of the great civil rights leaders, Whitney Young, James Farmers, Sammy Davis Jr., and all that. So this is one occasion that he came to school to do some reading for us. He was a very special person. Oh, that's Pete Seeger. You know, one of his projects was Hudson River is a big river in New York City, and it was quite polluted. So one of his projects is Peter Seeger. I'm sure you all know him. He's the most famous folk singer. He got himself a ship, and he was sailing along the Hudson River every day and exposing the dead fish and all that terrible thing that was happening to the river. And he managed to really bring to the consciousness they have to do something about that river. So he contacted me and the school that he wanted to get some of our students involved in this project. So I introduced some of them to him. And then a few years later, when I met him in some occasion, we talk about the good old days and our student and all that. I'm sure he's in heaven.
And this is the end.
Okay, this is basically the end of my picture and my presentation. So Jennifer, you can take it from here.
Yes. All right, so we've got about 10 minutes. So if you have questions, please post them in the chat. I have a couple already prepared. So I love the milk story. And I imagine that coming to the US, particularly New York, was strange, exciting, and overwhelming. Can you talk about any other things that you remember as kind of jumping out to you of, unexpectedness?
The tea.
Actually, since you mentioned milk, I remember something else. Again, this is old-fashioned tradition in my village. We don't drink coffee, we drink tea. And if you notice, where some of you may have known, that tea comes in a glass, and then small glasses of tea, and then there's a saucer right on. Put it down because it's very hot. And then we have there's no sugar, powder sugar, it's a lump. So you take the lump, you put it in your mouth, and you go, and you keep drinking your tea. This was the most fun scene for my fellow student in the cafeteria, because it really said, "Who's this monkey? who's not drinking coffee?" What else I remember in New York? Some of them are sad memory. I remember I was working in a restaurant as a dishwasher, and it was a Christmas Eve. There was lots of music and things like this, and it was snowing very hard. And the manager asked me that when the people are leaving, I should go out and clean the snow from their cars, and bring the car to the front so they don't get cold and wet. So this was, and they tip me 25 cents when I would do all this. And some of them, they were so drunk that they forget that 25-cent tip to give me. Oh, I hated them. And it's this, those. And another thing I remember again, as a dishwasher, one thing good about being a dishwasher, I want to know, this was a good part. I would get lots of good food because I didn't have to pay for the food. And and lots of these wonderful people, they order a big piece of a steak and they never finish it. They only eat a portion of it. So quickly I would take it to the kitchen and I wrap it up in a bag or paper and I take it home. So I had for next day, I had a nice piece of a steak to eat that left over from the restaurant. One day I remember in one restaurant, I think I was a waiter at that time. This couple used to come often, and they had a cute little daughter. And I told you, they used to call me Jimmy. They didn't finish their food. And I said, "Jimmy, do you mind put this food in a bag for our doggy?" So the little girl said, "But mommy, we have no dog." And so she was so sad that the poor girl, I said, "We have no dog. We have no dog." That's it. That's right. Go ahead.
So, are there things you do miss about Iran? And do you have a particular memory that comes to mind when you think about being there?
Not really. It's amazing that many people ask me, "Have you ever been back?" I said, "No." I said, "Do you miss it?" I said, "No." The experiences of a young person in late 50s and early 60s in that country, especially if you belong also to religious minority. So there was I had two trouble with me. One was I had a big mouth, so I would say something and I always get attacked or get harassed. Plus my religious. I remember there was a concert in a club and there was a long line of people waiting to get a ticket. I remember I had to wait in that line for 2 hours. Suddenly this police officer came, or military officer came on the jeep, parked the car and went right ahead of the line to get his ticket. So of course, most of the people in line, they shut their mouth, they didn't say something, but stupid me, I opened my mouth, I said, "Officer, we've been waiting here for 2 hours. It's not fair that you go and get a ticket ahead of us." Oh my God, he came to me, he slapped me so hard in the face that, believe me, for a few moments, I was becoming unconscious. So then the idea of even getting a passport to leave the country, the harassment that you go through, the bribe they ask you have to pay. Yeah, you folks in America are very lucky, even though you have some problem too. But this is really a blessing. to compare with the. That's why thousands and millions of people historically, really, they burn the bridges behind them, and they come to this country not because you don't want to leave your birthplace, you don't want to leave your home and your relative and family, but things get so bad that you have no choice. You have to go. You have to do it.
All right, last question, and then we're going to finish up for the evening. What do you hope that readers take away from your novel?
I'm sorry, say again.
What do you hope readers will take from your novel?
That they should appreciate the blessing that they have in America. That's really a big one. Is we take for granted some of the things that we have. That's one of the things. The other thing that if you are steadfast and if you try hard, you can easily make it in this country. If you want after the money, good luck. Go ahead, open your Dunkin' Donut. But if you are after education and after raising good children and all that, you also have that opportunity. And I think I had those opportunities, and I'm very grateful, really.
Well, I want to say thank you very much for joining us this evening and giving us your time. I've really enjoyed this, and I hope that everyone who tuned in has as well. If you are participating in our summer reading challenge, you can use the code authors21 to register your program attendance for this particular event. And if you haven't registered yet, we hope that you will. The program is for everyone, not just children. You can visit our website, fortworthlibrary.org, to register. And if you'd like to purchase a copy of the book, there are copies available at our local bookstore, Independent, the Dock Bookshop in Fort Worth. And I have their contact information here up on the screen. We have a great lineup of upcoming author visits this summer, so we hope you join us again. So thank you very much. I really enjoyed this evening, and I hope everyone has a great evening.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Good night.